Dear listeners, a programming note. You are listening to episode 911 from Bob Rees. This is actually a re-release of a podcast he recorded 5 years ago. Bob has recently recorded a new podcast in July of 2026. That is on episode 913 if you'd like to check out his newest episode. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my friend Bob Rees. Welcome to the podcast, Bob.
Thank you, Richard. It's wonderful to be here in this community that I love and just care so much about.
I've been aware of Bob for quite a while. This is the first time we visited, so I'm going to hear stories from Bob like you are going to hear that will be helpful for us. Bob is one of my few guests that I can go on the internet and find his Wikipedia page, and that helps me as a podcast host to know more about Bob. And I'll link to his Wikipedia page, but there's a number of sections. There's his biography. He has a PhD. He's currently teaching. He's a visiting professor, and we'll talk about his just kind of what he's doing there. The second part of his Wikipedia page is all the interfaith and ecclesiastical stuff he's done for the LDS Church and humanitarian work. The fourth section, I skipped one, is all the writing that Bob has done. And we will link to some of the things that he's written and talk about those. 5 is things that Bob's probably embarrassed about, his honors, awards, and fellowships. So I probably won't get Bob to be able to talk much about that. But there are a lot of things there that rightly so provide recognition for Bob and his work. 6 is his work, references is 7, and sources is 8. I became aware of Bob when I kind of became an LGBTQ ally because I recognized Bob as somebody who's been in this space for perhaps 5 decades. Bob is in his 80s and is one of the members of our church that just has a long view of LGBTQ and faith, and has been writing and talking about this for a long time. And I'm relatively new by perspective, maybe in this space for 5 years. And so I hope that, and others of you may be in this space new, and I'm just grateful to have Bob on the podcast to share the work he's done and kind of his long view and give all of us perspective on a couple of these really important issues. Is that okay for an introduction, Bob?
That's wonderful. I'm happy to just jump in and start sharing thoughts and feelings and be able to answer any questions people have.
Will you tell our listeners your academic assignment right now, where you're teaching, and maybe just, you've taught so many different places, just take us to one or two of your very places. You've been in England, you've been all over the world, and you have a PhD. Just share with us where you're teaching and some of your favorite places.
Well, any place I've taught has been favorite because I love teaching. My family was hoping, like most people who came out of the Great Depression, that I would study law or medicine, and they were a little bit disappointed that I wanted to be a teacher. But I felt that was my calling, and so I taught for a number of years at UCLA. I've taught at UC Santa Cruz and UC Berkeley. I've taught I've spent about 4 years teaching in Eastern Europe just after the fall of the Soviet Union, when I was in the mission presidency of the Baltic States Mission. And that was a wonderful experience to teach in a country where it had been under a Soviet occupation for many years, and to find students who were afraid to give a voice, an opinion, or to express an idea. And so my field is the humanities, but I really I have such a kind of universal interest in everything that I don't stay within the typical academic boundaries. So I've taught 35 different courses in higher education, and all of them have been joyful. I now, for the past 10 years, I've been teaching Mormon studies at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. And we're a group of us are trying to establish a center for the study of the Latter-day Saint tradition here in the Bay Area, and that's been and is a wonderful project I'm working on now. It may be one of the last big goals I have to accomplish, but it's one that I'm very passionate about. And one of the things at GTU that I value is that there is a center for LGBT studies there. And a couple of years ago, they had a wonderful exhibit of portraits of Latter-day Saint gays and lesbians done by a Latter-day Saint artist. So there is an opportunity to be able to get into conversation with other religions. Almost every religion has had a challenge with how to deal with LGBT people. So it's wonderful to be in an interfaith and interreligious community doing that. So I love to teach, and I've spent probably 35 years of my life in the church teaching gospel doctrine class, which I think is the best calling in the church.
If I had talked to you when you were a high school student, would you have said that you wanted to teach for the rest of your life? Or did this come later in life or later in college years?
I came out of a very broken family background. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. My parents divorced when I was an infant. My mother married 5 times, my father 4. There was lots of abuse and disorder and dysfunction in that family. I didn't really quite know who I was or what I wanted to do. But when I went to BYU at age 17, I had the idea that I wanted to be a high school counselor. But I started taking courses, and I was just open. One of the wonderful things about a liberal education is that its function is to expose you to all of the ideas. So I was, for a time, was going to major in psychology and then in geology. And then I took a course in literature, Introduction to Literature from Robert K. Thomas, who was one of the great teachers of my life. And I just knew I was home there. I knew this was what I wanted to do. Is that his teaching had such a profound effect on me. So as I began studying Chaucer and Shakespeare and Milton and all of the modern poets, I just became so enamored of literature. And so I was able to get a National Woodrow Wilson Fellowship to go to graduate school. It's interesting that before I went on my mission, I didn't really have much focus, but my mission, I needed a lot of growing up to do, and my mission really provided a lot of that. So I went from being a kind of C+ student to an A student after my mission, and that was good enough to get me into a very good graduate program at the University of Wisconsin. And so that was one of the places where I learned. I feel that so much of our experiences in life are essentially to teach us how to love, and I think that's what our heavenly parents want us to learn. For whatever else we learn here, if we haven't learned how to love, then it hasn't been a success. I wrote an essay once where I said that the kingdoms of glory are really kingdoms of love, that the people who go to the celestial kingdom will be those who learn to love themselves. Then if you learn to love yourself and others, you move up. And if you learn to love yourself and others and love everyone, even your enemies, then that qualifies you for trying to do what God wants you to do. So each of these experiences, and one of the reasons why I think my experience with LGBT people has been so passionate for me is that it was, I had so much growing up to do coming out of that childhood that was so broken, and that I was so lost and lonely. My family has been converted to the church independent in 4 successive generations, independent of the previous generation, which is, I don't know of anyone else that can say that, but my great-great-grandparents joined the church, converts in 1850s in Fishguard, Wales, immigrated to the Great Basin with their three sons. My great grandfather went back to Wales. He couldn't stand the hard life. My grandmother joined the church, independent of that experience. My grandfather, whose name was Zoram, was never a member of the church. My father was converted who never joined the church until he was an adult, was converted by miraculous priesthood blessing. And then when he came home from the Second World War, when I was 10, he taught me about the gospel, about Jesus, and about the Book of Mormon. And that I had that sense, that what we call a shock of recognition, that this was good, and it was true, and it was beautiful. And because of that, I began to see this is something I wanted to be a part of and something I wanted to share with other people. And I think the best way that I felt I could do that is by teaching.
I love that story. Where did you go on your mission, Bob?
I went to the northern states. It was, by then, in those days, it included 3.5 states. It was a big mission. I think there are probably 4 missions there now, but it was a wonderful place for a young kid to grow up and try to find out what he was going to do in life.
Mission for me was also transformative and really focused me on my future. And I love that you came home from your mission so focused and have really followed that desire, and have had, multiple decades since then blessing people's lives. I love what you said about this. The kingdoms are about love, and life is about love. And to me, that just resonates with my increasingly understanding of the gospel. I'd love you to talk about helping, a couple topics here that you've been involved with for quite a while. One is just helping people that are going through a faith crisis, especially those that are still trying to make it work, and LGBTQ. Where would you like to start on either of those?
Well, I think that I would guess that anybody who has had some kind of a faith crisis isn't very alive in the world in which we live. There's so much to challenge our faith, even whether we are religious or not, whether we have a general faith. And since I teach at a theological university, I know that almost every religion, except atheists, I suppose, have a faith crisis. They're dealing with this, and with the increasing power of the secular world, religion is fighting an ongoing war for survival. So I find that God has given us both a heart and a brain and a spirit, and that we can't really make sense of the world without a conversation between both of them. I say that I distrust 2 kinds of Mormons: those who only think and those who never think. I've lately added 2 other kinds: those who only feel and those who never feel. That it is this conversation, this dialogue between our hearts and our minds that we have the best opportunity of finding truth. So people who look at the church only through their mind or only through their heart are going to only see part of the church. And the church is complex, it's dynamic, it's confusing at times, it's many things. I wrote an essay called Forgiving the Church and Loving the Saints, in which I talked about Kohlberg's stages of development, and that we are all hopefully in stages of spiritual evolution. And as institutions and as people, I've lived long enough to see the church make a dramatic evolution on LGBT issues. We are in a very different place than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I hope we're in a different place than we will be in 10 years. I don't think we are through evolving by any means, but it's been wonderful for me to see and to have a ministry within this arena as well as other arenas. My wife used to say to me, "Why are you so involved with LGBT people?" And my response is, "I don't know. I don't have a gay person in my family. I don't have any gay children. But I somehow felt very early called to this particular ministry, and I can say it has been a joyful one. And I would say, in terms of what I was saying before, I was kind of leading to saying that I've been blessed to have people who taught me how to love. And one of the reasons why I have feelings about gay marriage and why I rejoiced when the Supreme Court validated gay marriage was because even though I feel that how the church handled that is up to the church, but it was through marriage to my first wife, who passed away 10 years ago, and to my current wife, Gloria, that I've learned to love. I had a lot of learning to do, but it was also as a friend and as a bishop to a number of young gay Latter-day Saint LGBT people. When I was bishop of the Los Angeles First Ward in the 80s, those people taught me how to love. They taught me to expand my heart, to expand my mind, to expand my spirit, to embrace them. And when I said to you before we got on this interview, Richard, that I felt during those 5 years that I lived in a state of grace. And part of that state of grace, a good part of it, was just ministering to LGBT people and seeing their devotion to the church, as being with them during their heartbreak. One of the great experiences I had that kind of illustrates what was possible, I got a call from a family who said, I got a call from a man who said, my brother has just moved into your ward. He is gay, he's living with his gay partner. I wonder if you would go visit him. And I said I would be glad to, because one of the things I tried to do in that ward is to say, this ward is a place that everybody is welcome. And so I went to see Brad Murdoch and found him to be a wonderful human being, and met his partner, Patrick. And I knew he was dying of AIDS. And I said, well, why don't you come to church Sunday? He said, well, that's not possible, is it? And I said, of course it is. You're welcome at the church. So he came to church, and my ward opened their arms wide for him. And my wife, who was the choir director, music director, invited him because he was in the first Saturday's Warriors cast. She knew he was a good singer, invited him to be in the choir. He started coming, and I knew we had the clock was ticking. So after a month or two, I said, I come into the office. I said, have you ever thought of going to the temple? He said, yeah. I said, of course, I would like to. My family's all gone, but I know that's not possible. And I said, well, maybe it is. I said, I'm going to ask you the questions I would ask you if we were having an interview. I just want you to think about them. So I did. I went through those questions, and a couple of months later, I said, have you been thinking about those questions? And he said, yes. I said, are you ready for me to ask them for real? He said, yes. So I said, how does Patrick feel about these questions? He said, Patrick loves me, and he wants what I want, which is to go to the temple before I die. So we asked the questions. The stake president, Howard Anderson, was wonderful, interviewed him. And on a certain weekend, his family came down from Santa Barbara. His mother, his father was not a member, but his mother and his siblings. And we had I was his escort through the temple. And it was a beautiful experience. Unbeknownst to me, Richard, the temple president got a call that morning from somebody who said, you've got somebody going through the temple today who's not worthy to go through. And the temple president said, what do you mean? He said, well, you've got a gay man who's going through the temple. So the temple president didn't know what to do. He called the stake president. And the state, sorry, it's hard for me to talk about this, but the stake president said, Temple president, I want you to get the name of whoever that brother is who calls you. And I want you to call his stake president and tell him to call a counsel for someone who is meddling in things that he has no business meddling in. This brother who is going through the temple today has been interviewed by his bishop and by me. He's worthy to go through the temple. And, Brad never knew that.
Wow.
He never knew that somebody had called. But afterwards, we had this wonderful thing. And when other members of my ward who were heterosexual were saying, how can you condone somebody going to the temple when they're living with their partner? And I said, because Patrick loves Brad, and Patrick is going to be the one who takes care of him while he dies. And they have agreed to be chaste. And that is a situation that I believe I honor. And so Brad did pass away.
Wow.
But sorry in a sense to be so tender-hearted about this, but it really illustrates to me how much our LGBT people need to be loved, how much they need to be honored for their desire to be faithful, how much they need to be nurtured in ways that I think Christ calls us to nurture them.
That's a great story, Bob. I love following the spirit that you and President Anderson did to get this young man to the temple, and you both saw his heart and the role of his partner in his life, and the support they received from you. Just keep telling stories, Bob. Tell us, talk about faith, talk about LGBTQ, just keep sharing just thoughts in your heart or in your mind.
Part of it that I began, part of my education was to begin trying to make sense of how LGBT people were treated in the church in light of the New Testament and the Book of Mormon. And the first thing I had to say was, why would anyone, when everybody was saying, well, this is something people chose and they can change it. I kept saying, why would anyone choose to be gay in a community that is so hostile to them? Only somebody who is a masochist would do that. But still, these people were, so many of them were willing to stay in the church, even though I felt they were being rejected and reviled and treated as outcasts. They kept coming, and the heartbreak for me was that some of them finally couldn't, take it, because I could understand that there was so much rejection, and the rejection began in their families. I did not understand and will never understand how a parent could reject a child who was gay. I remember, in fact, having a call from a family when I was bishop, and the mother said, we don't know what to do. Our 17-year-old boy has just come out to us and told us he's gay. And I said, well, you should love him and accept him in the family. She said, well, we're afraid he's going to cause the other kids to become gay. And I said, this is not an infectious disease. This is not a disease. This is not a malady. This is a human condition that we don't understand, except we know that some people have it. And or I had another man call me and say, I don't know what to do. I have a gay daughter. I love her. We have a good relationship, but she's going to get married to her partner. And I don't know. I don't think I can go to the wedding. I don't know what to do. And I said, of course you should go to the wedding. You should go. And he said, but what about my 13-year-old daughter? I said, take her to the wedding and have her celebrate her sister's marriage. This is this is the most important day in your older daughter's life. The whole family should celebrate. But that families, I remember one family, a woman, a friend of mine, her father was a bishop in Salt Lake, a large family. Every year they had a reunion. And when they found out that this particular sister who lived in Washington, D.C. area, when they found out they had a gay son, the father, who was a bishop, said, well, you can't come to family reunions anymore. And I just thought, how can that happen in Christ Church? And this woman was telling me a very sweet story that her son went through all of the turmoil of trying to be a gay teenager and stay in the church and trying to, I think he may even have gone on a mission, as many people did, hoping that would change them. If they could prove to God they were faithful enough, God would change them from being gay. And she said, I didn't really understand my son's gayness until we were at his house. He and his partner had rented an apartment, and they wanted us to come and help them furnish it. And she said he was at the top of the stairs, and he called down to his partner, and he said, hey, honey, would you bring this up? And she said, he spoke to him in the same way, in the same tenderness with which my husband and I spoke to one another. And I realized that relationship was just like ours, except that, it was same sex instead of opposite sex. So she saw the humanness of her son in a new way. So that fortunately, we have I'd like to say no parents who reject their students. But a couple of years ago, I was in Ogden working with some people at there's a shelter there for LGBT people, and there were some transgender kids there whose parents had kicked them out of their house. Some of them were living on the streets. Some of them were doing things that they shouldn't do to try and make enough money to survive. And I just think, if you can't go home, then there's something wrong with your religion. I have in this collection of essays that's going to be published next month called Why I Stay, The Challenges of Discipleship for Contemporary Mormons. My essay is called Going Home. And the whole reason we are here in terms of what our Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father planned for us is they want us to go home. And they are welcoming us back to that home. No matter how sinful we've been, we will have a home. And so there needs to be a church home. If I say to people, imagine this Sunday, if you're sitting in church and someone comes in and sits down beside you who has wearing a skirt and has a beard, what would you do? Ask yourself, would I invite this person to dinner? How do we respond to the least of these? And I think that one of the things I feel, Richard, is that Christ calls us to use our imaginations. Christ had this great imagination. He could imagine all of us redeemed. No matter how sick or how sinful we were, he imagined us in the Garden of Gethsemane, made whole. And so we need to imagine what it would be like if we are not LGBT, what it would be like. And I had this experience. I was called a number of years ago to go out to a group of people in a ward out in east of San Francisco, a group of people who had been having a gathering for themselves. They had their own little study group for a number of years, about a dozen of them. And they invited me to come out and talk about my experience working with LGBT people. And so I began by saying, the first question I'd like to ask is, when did you choose to be heterosexual? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if sexual orientation is a choice, you must have chosen. No, we've always been this way. I said, okay, I'm going to ask you another question. You're sitting next to somebody that you have loved for 20, 30, 40 years. You've had children, grandchildren. You have grown up and grown spiritually and emotionally by this person who's sitting next to you. Just look at that person right now, this person that you love and have loved. And I want you to go back to the time when you fell in love and decided that you wanted to marry one another. What would you have done if you had been told that your only choice was to marry someone of your own gender? What choice would you have made? I'm not going to ask you to tell me, but I want you to answer in your heart, what would you have done? In your imagination, could you imagine yourself giving up this person that you love and marrying somebody that you didn't or couldn't perhaps love in the same way, that you could not have intimacy with? So I think if we use our imaginations, and that certainly helped me as a bishop, I tried to imagine what these people were going through, some of whom had been rejected by their families and who had come out of other wards where they had been, I think, abused by their ecclesiastical leaders. So using imagination, I think, is a helpful thing to do.
I love that. And I love you tying it into Matthew 25. There's a couple books on your list that are, I'll just read the titles in introduction to this question. A Guide for Latter-day Saint Families Dealing with Homosexual Attraction. That's Deseret Book in 2002. And another one in 20, Supportive Families, Healthy Children, Helping Latter-day Saint Families with Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Children. And that's San Francisco State University, 2012. There's a lot of LDS parents that are connecting to this podcast, and others because they just learned they have an LGBTQ child and they're freshly on this road looking for direction. Talk to that group. Talk to those parents, Bob, and what you'd want them to know.
Well, that second book that you talked about, Supporting Families, Healthy Children, I was invited by Dr. Caitlin Ryan, a wonderful Catholic woman, lesbian, who is associated with San Francisco State University. She called and said she'd been Caitlin, this is a wonderful story. Here's this good Catholic lesbian woman who spent years in Utah trying to help Latter-day Saint families. And she did that because she said, one of the reasons why I do this is that I see that Latter-day Saints honor the family in such a unique and powerful way. And she said, I need somebody to help me write a guide for those families. So Caitlin and I wrote that guide, which has been and is being used by counselors and by ecclesiastical leaders. You can go on the website, let's see, I guess it's Supportive Families, Healthy Children.org, I think. But we can post something.
Yeah, we'll link to that, listeners, in the podcast.
Anyway, that's a wonderful guide. And I think the most important thing, Caitlin is the first one to do real significant research, scientific research on this. And what she found through studying people across a spectrum is that the difference between if a family is rejecting of their LGBT child, that child is 7 times more likely to attempt or commit suicide than a family who is loving. And even if a family can say, I don't understand this, I don't like it, but you're my child, I love you, and I'll always love you, that is enough to keep the child from moving into that space where they feel so hopeless. Because to be rejected by your family is one of the great rejections. I mean, it's something that I don't know that anybody can really recover from it. So what Caitlin and I did in that book is to say, here is a guide. Here are 100 behaviors. Here are some dysfunctional behaviors. Here's some loving behaviors. All you have to do is be committed to trying to love your child, to send those messages of love. Because what happened, at least a generation ago, is that LGBT people were told not only did the families not love them, but God didn't love them, and the church didn't love them. And this is why so many committed suicide or who went to addiction, because they just felt there was no hope for them. And who of us can stand those kind of negative messages that we're unworthy, that we're wicked, that we're sinful, and have the ego to somehow get through that. We're human beings. We have feelings. And so that booklet is, I think, the most powerful thing that a family, a parent can read, or a bishop can read. It teaches you that the difference, the choice between being rejecting and being accepting is profound. It is the difference between life and death in many instances. And it's so easy just to be kind and loving. Even if you don't accept it, even if you can't understand it, this is a child entrusted to you by heavenly parents to love them as your heavenly parents love them. And so I think that there is a great accounting to do for parents who reject their children and who cast them out of their presence. We need a home. One of the other things that I find is really sad about us is that I haven't done a scientific study of it, but I found that many, perhaps most LGBT people who leave the church do not go to another church, do not find another spiritual home. And I feel that's a failure of us, that we have so indoctrinated people to feel that if this is the one and only true church and it is not true for them, then nothing is. There are, one of the things, I have a nephew, in fact, who is, he's not an active member of the church, but he lives in another city, and he wanted to go to church. I called his bishop and said, I've got a nephew, and I'd like him to come back to church. He's gay. And the message I got from the bishop was not an encouraging one. So I said to my nephew, go to the Episcopal Church. They know how to deal with gay people in a way that many of our bishops do not. One of the beautiful and yet sad experiences I had when I was a bishop, I had a wonderful Latter-day Saint man come to my he didn't belong in our stake, but like a lot of other people who came to the LA First Ward, they came because they knew it was a place where they could come and they could sing the hymns of Zion. They could mingle with the saints. They could find a safe haven. And this one man, a distinguished Latter-day Saint, he was a prominent actor. He said to me, why don't you come to my church sometime? This was after I was released from being a bishop. And he said, come to my church. I said, I'd love to. I go to other churches because I want to learn how they can teach me how to be a better Christian, how to be a better child of God. So I went to his church. It was a Catholic Episcopal church in Hollywood. And it was on, I think it was on maybe, I can't remember if it was Palm Sunday or it was maybe it was the first day of Lent. The man who invited me was the leader of the lay ministry. He's a returned Mormon missionary. The man who played the organ was a returned gay Mormon missionary.
Wow.
The man who built the organ was a returned gay Latter-day Saint missionary. There were two other, and this church had become a home for these gay Latter-day Saints, all returned missionaries, who didn't feel that there was a home for them. And we went to lunch afterwards. I asked them to tell me their stories. And the sad thing to me is that all of them wished that they could be in a Latter-day Saint meeting. All of them wished they could be with Latter-day Saints singing the hymns of Zion. And that to me, just like so many experiences I've had working with LGBT people, it made me very sad. The denial of, or the policy, the 2015 policy, made me so sad for so long. I just couldn't make sense of it. It just didn't make and doesn't make any sense to me that we could deny to these people. And I tell in an article I never published, but have written on this, I talk about a family I knew who had a gay man married a woman, a heterosexual woman. as many of them did in those generations, because they were told this will cure your homosexuality, one of the really great falsehoods. Anyway, they married, they had twin boys, and then after a couple of years, they knew that this marriage was not going to work, so they separated. And she remarried, and he remarried. This was when he could marry, but each of them, they lived close by, so they could be families. But one of them had one of the twins, as most of the time. The other had the other twin, and the twins were 7 years old. And that policy came out.
Wow.
And you had one twin who, by that policy, could be baptized by his father. You had another twin who could not.
Wow.
Or one twin, you could be that, yeah. And I saw so many instances in which families were just split over this, and people who were faithful in every way, except in one way. That is, they had married in order to form a family, in order to fulfill the ideal that the Latter-day Saint, every primary child who graduates from primary has an ideal, which is one of the most important things I have to do is to find somebody and marry them and form a family and be an eternal family. So some people, when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, whatever, realize that ideal is not going to work for them. And so many of them still try to make it work. And so they find somebody that they love and want to form a family with. And this policy, it seemed to me, it was just so draconian. It did not make sense to me. It still doesn't. I'm so grateful that it no longer is a policy we have to live with. But I just saw so many broken hearts over that. And we have too many broken hearts already. We have too many LGBT people who have left our community. And one of the great sadnesses, as I know you know, Richard, is that very often LGBT people are other gifted. They have gifts, many of them, that are unusual. They have gifts that can bless the church. They can bless the kingdom of God. And if they're not here, we are made poorer by it. We are robbed of their fellowship and of their talents and of their gifts, and they are robbed of ours as well. So we just must do everything we can to make our homes and our places a safe haven. You know, I know wards where people who are married or people who are not married, who are gay, living with their companions, are welcomed into a ward. And I know other people are horrified by that, but I say I've never been in a ward, and I've lived in lots of places. I've never been in a ward in which there were not heterosexual cohabiting people, not married, unmarried cohabiting heterosexual people. How do we treat them? We welcome them. We welcome them to our socials. We welcome their children to primary. We welcome them to young men and young women. We do everything we can to socialize them. We do not treat LGBT either married or cohabiting people in the same way. Why do we make that difference? Jesus wouldn't make such a distinction. How can we justify that? I don't think the gospel allows us to do that. And this is why I say we all stand condemned before the 25th chapter of Matthew. None of us teach the least of these as Jesus did. We all need to, whoever that least is. And in this instance, we have not treated these people whom we have treated as the least by our behavior. We have not treated them as Jesus tells us that we must. And this is why the great lesson is that those whose hearts have been broken and healed over this are called to heal broken hearts. We are all called to be, in Isaiah's term, the healer of shattered hearts. And that is no more true than any place. than it is with our LGBTQ, whatever alphabet words we use to define or categorize other people. These are our brothers and sisters whom we knew in the pre-existence and whom we will know in the post-existence. And how wonderful it will be when we are embraced in that next world, as we embrace them in this world, as they want to be embraced. So this is a calling we all have. This is still one of the great works I believe we have to do as Latter-day Saints. We have to be as welcoming, as loving. A good friend of mine who lives in New Zealand a number of years ago taught me something which has been very transformative in my life. I was having problems with a particular relationship, and I was asking him, I don't know what to do. I feel really torn. And he said, Bob, there's only one question to ask yourself in any situation. This is the question: what is the most loving thing I can do? I try to ask that of every person that I meet, and I don't always answer it in the right way. I'm still struggling in the way that I answer it, and it isn't always easy to answer. It isn't an easy question. Sometimes the complexities of love cause us to go deep into our hearts. But I think if we ask ourselves, with this person who is in my family or in my community or in my congregation, who is gay, lesbian, transgender, other, whatever they are, what is the most loving thing I can do? And what is the most loving thing I can do with them and for them? I think if we just ask that one question, it could be transformative. If a bishop and a Relief Society president, a young women's leader, has a girl who comes to her and say, I'm really confused about my sexuality. I'm finding that I really am attracted to other girls. Not to be horrified, not to feel, oh my gosh, what's happening here? But as they tell me about this, let's sit down and talk about it. The most loving thing you can do is exactly what you are saying in your book, Richard, and what you're doing in this: to listen and to learn and to love. And to listen, Rumi says we should listen to one another with the deep ear inside our chest, that is, with our hearts. Listen with your hearts, listen with your ears, listen with your mind, listen with your body. Just listen with your presence. Listen as you would like your Savior and your heavenly parents to listen to you. And if you can listen and then learn, and then when you've learned how to love, that is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And Richard's book has wonderful examples and lessons of how to do that. Caitlin Ryan's and my booklet on supportive families, healthy families, supportive families, healthy children, is a wonderful thing, and you can even download a copy for free from that website. These are simple things, but they're hard things, I know, because I grew up in a family in which I was taught to hate gay people. We used words, slang words, for gays and lesbians. I was sexually abused by my Latter-day Saint music teacher as a boy.
Wow.
He was gay. I was sexually abused by him. It didn't change me into a gay person. It confused me. And it took me some time to heal from that. But I can remember as a teenager living in Long Beach, my friends would say, let us go down to the Pike, which is an entertainment center. Let's go down there and roll some queers. That's how I grew up. I remember walking down the street when I was 15 and seeing two gay men walking toward me, and I felt my fist clutch, like it was something that I should do to physically reject that. I can overcome that only because of what I was taught in the New Testament. It was hard, but at a certain point, I realized that those attitudes and those behaviors, I felt embarrassed. I do feel embarrassed that when I was a young missionary at 19, and we had a gay elder. Behind his back, we called him Sister So-and-so. I feel terrible that I did that. I feel terrible that I had those feelings. But I knew something was wrong with them when I began to read the New Testament, when I began to meet real gay people. I was fortunate in both in graduate school and as a professor to have had gay professor friends and gay students and gay graduate assistants. And I began to say, these people are no different than I am, except in this one way. And that way cannot be something that causes me to reject or discriminate against them. So this has been, I've been in this ministry for, I guess, over 40 years, but it's been a wonderful ministry, and I expect that it will continue to be, because I love my gay, lesbian, transgender brothers and sisters, and I love their families who nurture and guide and love them. And I hope that I can play some role in teaching people who don't yet have this understanding how to do the most loving thing.
That's a beautiful segment, Bob. It's one of the finest segments we've ever had on this podcast, to be honest. And you said some things that I will never forget. One is this idea of a deep ear inside our heart, our chest, as a way to visualize the importance of listening. And then I love this idea, what is the most loving thing I can do in a situation? And I just think you're teaching the law of love. You're teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have this New Testament, but then to apply it in our lives is the way that you're teaching us to do that. And you have to apply in our lives to people that are different than us. It's easy to love people that are just like us. It's harder, but more rewarding and more healing for both when we learn to love people. Just what would you say to parents that, and you've really kind of answered this, that say, do I have to choose between the church I love and supporting my gay son or daughter as they're pursuing a path that's inconsistent with church teachings? Help parents navigate that.
That's what I would call a Sophie's Choice, if you remember that movie where Sophie has to choose between two children, which one is put into a train to go to the gas chamber, and which one can she keep. That is not a choice anyone has to make. It's not a choice anyone should ever feel compelled to make. You don't have to choose. The great thing about the restored gospel is that it gives us an enlarged understanding of our heavenly parents. We do not see a God who is vindictive, who is punitive, who is capricious, who is selective. We see a God whose heart, his and her hearts are as wide and as capacious as eternity. And so if you feel that, if you feel you have to leave something, you cannot leave your child. But I don't think the church asks you to do that. And if you feel that it does, you need to help the church understand you have as much right to belong to the church with a gay child as anybody does. I think this was, but one of the things that's true is that there still is a stigma. I know friends in our stake who have, I know a woman who has a transgender child, and she's not had an easy time raising that child in this stake. I know of gay people in the stake whose experience is not favorable. I know lots of parents. I know parents who've left the church because their children were rejected by the church. I hope that if I had a child and I was in a ward and the board rejected him, I'd find another ward. And I know that we're supposed to go to our geographical ward, but there's a higher law here, which is to to find a welcoming place. And if you don't find one, try to make one. But I said to you, Richard, I think before we began, that no one that I know of my generation, certainly, or maybe of any generation, came full-blown enlightened from their mother's womb on LGBT issues. We all have to learn. We all have to go through this. But we live in a world in which, there are many countries now still where it's a capital, or there are some countries at least, where it's a capital offense to be gay, to be openly gay. There are lots of countries where LGBT people are rejected and treated and murdered. We have laws against that, but still, this is not a friendly world for LGBT people. I'll tell you, do we have time for one more story?
Oh, you bet. This is a great format for stories.
Oh, it's another really sad story, but because I've been involved in this work, I get calls from time to time. And I got a call from a young man in St. Louis, and he said, I'm investigating your church, and I'm really excited about what the missionaries have been teaching me. But he said, I'm also trans. I identify as a woman, but he said, the people in this ward don't know what to do with me. He said, I dress as a man because I realize that that's kind of what I have to do, but they don't really want me in priesthood, and they don't want me in Relief Society. And when I have to use the bathroom, I have to go down to Walgreens because no one wants me to use either bathroom. And so I said, well, give me the name of your bishop, his number. I called and got the counselor, and the counselor said, no, excuse me, it was a woman who was transitioning to male. So I got that confused, transitioning to male. So she was going to church. He was going to church. I'll use that right pronoun, the one that he wanted. He was dressing as a man. He identified as male, dressed as male, going to church. And that's when they didn't want him in Relief Society or priesthood. So I said to the counselor, this is a person who's accepted the gospel. And he said, well, the mission president doesn't know what to do with him, and doesn't tell us we shouldn't baptize this person. I said, well, let me tell you something about what it means to be a transgender person from my experience with them. And he kept referring to this person who's, I'll call him John, as a female. And I said, well, he identifies, this is the name he's going by. That's the name you need to use. And so later I talked to this person, I'll call him John, and he said, I asked that man for a blessing, and he insisted on blessing me with my female name.
Wow.
And so I said, well, let me write to the mission president. I wrote the mission president. The mission president said, well, I've written to the general authorities, and they don't know. They say they don't really have a policy, but we discourage baptism of someone who is this way. And so I said to John, look, we're not where we should be yet. It doesn't look like baptism is possible. Go to the Episcopal Church because they know how to handle this. Kind of lost touch with him, and he had made acquaintance with some other people in the church in Salt Lake, and one woman I know who had a trans child. And when I saw her, said, have you heard anything from John? And she said, oh, Bob, he committed suicide.
Oh, gee.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, what an absolutely unfortunate and heartbreaking story. This was a man, he had been rejected by his family. He thought he had found a family in our church. when he heard the gospel, it touched him deeply, but he couldn't find a home. So I think we still have a long way to go. We have a lot to learn. And these are lessons that are learnable. These are lessons that we can learn. And it's right there in the pages of the New Testament and the Book of Mormon. There, Elder Cook's wonderful expression of love for LGBT people. There are increasing, Elder Holland, among others, has been very loving and has been just, I think, very enlightened on how the best way for the church to address these issues. So I've written an essay called Repairing the Church, and it's something I feel we're all called to do. The Jews have a saying called Tikkun Olam, which means every Jew feels called to repair the world. It's something God calls us all to do. I also think we're called to repair the church. I just briefly will say I spoke at the Institute of Religion at Berkeley a couple of years ago, and I asked them, I said, whose church is this? And they said, well, it's the Church of Jesus Christ. I said, there are two possessives in the name of the church. It's the Church of Jesus Christ, but it's also the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which means it's your church and my church as well. It's not the Church of the First Presidency or the Quorum of the 12. It's the church of all of those who identify as saints, Latter-day Saints. And therefore, we're all called to repair and to change it and support it and renew it and to restore it. The restoration is an ongoing process. We are still need to restore some of the truths that Jesus taught as far as our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are concerned. It's good work. It's loving work. It's work we have to do.
Some really tender segments, Bob, and I love in that even that segment before that, your own honesty at age 15 in Long Beach with your own homophobia, and I certainly have tried to be honest and apologize for that in my own life. But I think as we do that, we set an example for others to be able to apologize, and that's part of healing and repairing. I love the word repair. You've been in this space for 4 decades. There's people that are hoping that we'll continue to make progress as a church. Just talk to that. Do you have hope that, and you've kind of alluded to this, over the next period of time we'll continue to do better in this space?
Yes, and one of the reasons I have hope for two reasons. One, there are a lot more LGBT people in the church. There are more general authorities who have gay, lesbian family members, and there are more people who have served as bishops and even as stake presidents and relief society presidents who have gone through the experience of being gay, lesbian, or trans. So I think to know a person, to really know a person, really by listening, learning, and loving, it's really hard to reject them if you see them as a child of God. If you see them as someone that Jesus died for, how come you not be loving to them? So the very fact that we have that, and we also have a generation of young people growing up in the church who have lots of gay friends, as we have become more open as a society, as we now have LGBT clubs, even at BYU, as we have more and more gay people who are in politics and in entertainment. We have them in professional athletics. We see that they're full-blooded, gorgeous human beings that we can be friends with and we can love. So I think just the very fact that there are an increasing number, the very fact that we've changed church policy, we've changed our government policy in terms of discrimination, that we have people in our communities who are in the corporate world, in the civic world, that just by that, I think we will. But I think that God still has, there's still many great and important and even wonderful things which are yet to be revealed to us, to the church, according to what we say in the Articles of Faith. And some of those great and important things relate to LGBT people. B.H. Roberts, in his wonderful discourse on discipleship, said something quite remarkable. He said, this was, maybe 100 years ago. He said, but it's still true. He said, not a tenth, not a hundredth, not a thousandth part of what was revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith has yet been unrevealed to the world or to the church. And therefore, he says, the church requires disciples who are willing to take what he called the primitive teachings and to refine them into, may not be his words, but what I would call more enlightened doctrines. And in that refining process, we refine our souls and our hearts, but we also refine our communities and our congregations. So that there will come a time, I hope it's in my lifetime, where a gay or transgender person can walk into any LDS congregation in the world and be welcomed with open arms and be born into any family and be treated equally with any other member of that family. That's the ideal, but it's also an ideal that I think can become real as we strive to make the gospel work in our lives. I knew Stuart Mattis.
Wow.
Most of you know Stuart Mattis' story. I'll probably close with this. It's another sad and tragic story, but Stuart was a gay Latter-day Saint living in the Bay Area. He called me. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time. Said, can I come and see you? And I said, of course. He came over and we spent a wonderful time together, and we visited on other occasions. And I said, I knew that he had suicide ideation. And I said, the most important decision you can make is to stay alive. You're too valuable a person. I said, in every way, you are what the church produces. You are the best the church produces. You have devoted your life. You've made sacrifices to let the gospel refine you into a wonderful, mature Latter-day Saint. The church needs you. And so he said he would, and we kept in touch. He was very difficult for him. He had a very loving bishop who was very supportive of him. He told me he'd fallen in love with a man and he didn't know what to do. And I said, you should do what is in your best interest, what your heart leads you to do. I'm not going to counsel you what to do, but it's your decision to make. But I will support you, whatever decision you make. If you decide to be celibate, I will support that. If you decide to have this person as a companion, I would support that. You're such a good human being. I went to Salt Lake to speak to Family Fellowship, which is a support group for families of LGBT people, and a wonderful group of people. If you don't know about Family Fellowship, and that's a group you can join. They're wonderful support groups. Anyway, I got home from that trip to Salt Lake, and there was a message on my machine from Stuart's mother saying that Stuart had committed suicide. He had gone to the stake center and taken his life with a weapon. And I'm still not healed from that. And I don't know that I ever will be, because that is a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. I went to Stuart's funeral service and spoke there. A group of us got together on the 10th anniversary of his death and just remembered him, his goodness, the beautiful spirit that he was. Here's someone who was willing to, I think he said to God, I will go to the temple every day if that will help. I will pay twice the tithing. I will do anything if you can change me. And it's so sad that somebody had to feel they had to make such a bargain and then finally feel there was no way out, no exit. So we need to make, first of all, exits, and we also have to create a world in which no one feels there is no exit. And we can only do that, my friends, by love and by loving, by asking ourselves what the most loving thing we can do.
I'm glad you talked to that, Stuart. I think that honors him and honors his family and gives hope for others. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, Bob?
No, but I just feel like I think we're all called to do some things. Some people are called to be church leaders. Some people are called to be explorers. Some people are called to be artists. Some people are called to be teachers. We're all called to love. It's the one calling that we have that we can't escape. And when I talk to people about Jesus' two great commandments, I say it's in reality Jesus has three commandments. You're to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength and spirit, and every way you can. You're to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So self-love is one of the three great commandments. A healthy self-love is necessary, and it's one of the things that I found in so much of my ministry is that LGBT people were taught to hate themselves, and that is a failing. So to love ourselves, to love others, no matter who they are, to love the least, that is a calling. And I feel, I've often thought that, on the day of judgment, I think most of us imagine that. And I imagine the day of judgment that Jesus calls me into his presence and I come loaded with all of the books of the good things that I've done, wheelbarrows full of all of my good deeds and all of this and all of the things I've published and all of the accomplishments, and I bring them in. I set all of these things on the table. Jesus doesn't even look at them. He might even just brush them off the table. He says, there's only one question, Bob. He opens it to the 25th chapter of Matthew and says, read this. And I read it, and he said, how did you do? That's the only question. The rest of it, well, it's important, pales in importance to that. So all of these things that we do, nothing can be more important than loving. And for a church, very few things can be more important than loving our LGBTQ fellow saints, as well as those who aren't saints, our fellow human beings. It's a great calling. We all have it, and it's a great blessing.
On behalf of all of our listeners, I'm just deeply moved, Bob, by your words, your spirit, your work, your great heart, by Matthew 25 and the simplicity of your message. It's not a complicated message. Here's a guy that could make things pretty complicated with all the education you have and all the books you've written and all the places you've taught, but your message is the power of the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ to love, and to love everybody without bounds. And you teach that in an authentic, wonderful way. So there's a lot, we have about 10 or 15,000 people listen to each episode. So you have helped a lot of people and touched a lot of lives, and that's just been your legacy. So on behalf of Richard Ostler, this is Bob Rees and Richard Ostler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.